Hello and welcome to another episode of Victor's Corner. I am your host, Victor Omoayo, one half of the Codex Prime podcast, and today is Wednesday, December 27th, 2017, and I am so glad to be back here. This is the 2-week hiatus of the main Codex Prime podcast, but as promised in last week's episode with AWOL, shoutouts to you, my friend, I have returned during the break to provide my list of top 20 favorite films of 2017. Now, before I get into that, I do want to give a couple quick reminders. First, we will be back as the Codex Prime podcast in 2 weeks' time on Tuesday, January 9th. I want to say January 9th. Let me look at the calendar. I could be wrong here. Sometimes I get my dates mixed up here. I should have had this prepared, but you know what? You know what? Sometimes you just got to roll with the punches. But if my calendar is right, then yes, I was right. Yes, we will be back Tuesday, January 9th. So that's 2 weeks' time, 2 weeks from yesterday. So we'll be back with an all-new episode of the Codex Prime podcast. In the meantime, you can always check out our awesome episodes from this year, especially last week. Now that The Last Jedi is in theaters, you can check out last week's episode in which we had AWOL guest star on our episode, and we talked about how awesome The Last Jedi is. Now I'll get into more of my thoughts of that film later on, because spoiler alert, it happens to be in my top 20 favorite films of the year. Then again, anybody who knows me, being a Star Wars fan, I mean, come on, look at my shirt, for God's sakes. I mean, it's no surprise that it would be on my list. But getting into the list of top 20 favorite films of 2017, looking at this year has been rather exciting for film. You had a lot of unique feature films that came out this year, as well as some great documentaries. And there are certain films that have come out this year that have managed to push the envelope creatively, as well as some films that have not only been sequels to well-established films from decades past, but also still managed to introduce a new perspective from long-standing franchises that have been around for like 3-4 decades or even more. And looking at how creative certain filmmakers have been this year, 2017 has been just a treasure trove of riches, for all sorts of cinematic tastes. So whether you're a fan of art house cinema or just mainstream popcorn munching fare, this year has got you covered. And before I get into my top 20 favorite films of the year, I do want to mention some honorable mentions. And these following 24 films did not make my top 20 list of favorite films of the year, but these films are still very much worth your time. And several of these I did review on the podcast as well. So the honorable mentions of 2017 include 1922, which you can find on Netflix, starring Thomas Jane, Baby Driver, which is Edgar Wright's latest film, The Big Sick, The Disaster Artist, which I reviewed a couple weeks ago, First They Killed My Father, a powerful film about the Khmer Rouge on Netflix, The Girl with All the Gifts, a unique post-apocalyptic sci-fi feature, Girls Trip, which is hilarious, Hidden Figures, Ingrid Goes West, It, one of the best Stephen King adaptations out there, It Comes at Night, Julieta, The Lost City of Zed, Loving Vincent, The Meyerowitz Stories, new and selected, another Netflix film starring Dustin Hoffman, Adam Sandler, and Ben Stiller. And this is actually a good Adam Sandler movie. Adam Sandler, he does have dramatic chops. When he's not doing BS movies like The Ridiculous Six or Jack and Jill, he proves that he does have some range. And I like to see more dramatic fare from Adam Sandler in the future. I still think that his best movie is Punch Drunk Love, but, that's neither here nor there. Some other honorable mentions include Mudbound, Patterson, Patty Cakes, Raw, The Salesman, Spider-Man Homecoming, Split, A United Kingdom, and Wind River. So these films are very much worth your time. These are the 24 films that that just missed the cut for my top 20 favorite films of the year. But again, very, very worthwhile checking these films out. Now, as far as documentaries go, this year has seen some tremendous films in the documentary, nonfiction genre, and before I give my one favorite documentary this year, there are 10 honorable mentions in the documentary category as well that you guys should take a look at as well. One documentary that you can find on Hulu called Batman and Bill, which is the story of how Bill Finger finally got his due credit as being the co-creator of Batman, not just Bob Kane. Chasing Coral, which is a eye-opening and rather heartbreaking documentary about the damages that has been wreaked upon the coral reefs across the globe, which is on Netflix. The Death and Life of Marsha P. Johnson. This one is a very powerful documentary about a LGBT icon. Five Came Back, which is based on Mark Harris's book of the same name, which features 5 World War II era filmmakers. I Am Not Your Negro, awesome documentary on James Baldwin by Raoul Peck. Nobody Speak, Trials of the Free Press, another Netflix documentary which focuses on Hulk Hogan's Gawker trial, among other things. One of Us. Now, this is a unique documentary. This one is about the Hasidic Jewish community in New York and how three former members managed to get away from that community and the effects of their lives as a result. Another documentary which didn't make my favorite documentary pick, surprisingly, is Rat Film, which I reviewed a few weeks ago on the podcast. Rat Film is a very distinct documentary, and hopefully it'll be made more widely available on other streaming platforms like Amazon or Netflix, because this one is very, very good. There's also 2 documentary miniseries which were featured on television, which I also recommend. One is Time, the Khalif Browder story, and this 5 or 6 part documentary series is about the tragic story of Khalif Browder, who was a young black man who was imprisoned in Rikers Island for allegedly stealing someone's backpack, and the variety of injustices that he went through, and tragically he took his own life back in 2015, and his mother passed away just last year. And this documentary this documentary really pissed me off because there's just so many avenues that Khalif Browder's life could have gone, more positive directions, if only I guess he had the support system that he needed, or if only more could have been done for him, I suppose. Like, I had a lot of questions about the documentary and about what more could have been done to save him. But it's very much a documentary series that's worth your time. It is streaming on Netflix as well, and it definitely proves that we have a lot to work on as far as our criminal justice system goes, especially in terms of race. And last but not least, another extraordinary documentary series is Ken Burns and Lynn Novick's series, The Vietnam War, which was 10 years in the making. And this documentary series is a 10-part series which was streaming on PBS, and I believe you can still find it on PBS's website, but if not, it's also available on DVD and Blu-ray. This documentary, The Vietnam War, chronicles the various causes, the root causes, and the ongoing effects of the Vietnam War, how it affected not only the Vietnamese and also the people who fought for the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese Army, but also for the American troops, some who were involved, who were interviewed in the film, who were involved as young men fighting that conflict, as well as innocent people, or civilians rather, on both sides. And this was a very extraordinary work, and this was a film that is well, I call it a film because like all Ken Burn documentaries are basically 18 to 20 hour multi-part epics, and the Vietnam War as a whole is an 18-hour film, and it was definitely an education in that whole conflict in that period in American history. most of the effects of which are still felt to this day. And if you're a history buff or someone who's always wanted to learn more about the Vietnam War, but just didn't in school or for some reason, then this is a documentary that I absolutely recommend. So that's a documentary by Ken Burns and Lynn Novick, The Vietnam War. Absolutely worth your time. Before I get into my number one documentary film, I see Carl has chimed in on the chat. He says that I am late. Yes, I am late, Carl, for due to some little bit of technical hiccups on my end. But I did post that there was a slight change in the time that I would start at 6:30 instead of 6 o'clock. But I am here. I thank you for tuning in, Carl, and whoever else decides to pop up on the chat. Very much appreciated. My favorite documentary this year, my number one, is a documentary that you can find on Amazon Prime. So if you're an Amazon Prime user, you can watch this for free on their service. And it's called City of Ghosts. City of Ghosts is a documentary directed by Matthew Heineman. And it's a documentary about this Syrian journalist group called Raqqa is being slaughtered silently. And it's about how this group of underground journalists have managed to report and secretly record footage of ISIS and how they invaded the Syrian town of Raqqa, and how they've managed to keep the people in that town under siege, and all the horrible atrocities that they've committed, like public executions, propaganda, pro-ISIS propaganda, and it's a very unsettling documentary, but I think it's absolutely necessary because this documentary does not shy away from the atrocities that ISIS has committed and still does to this day, and it shows just how necessary and how extraordinary and how risky the field of journalism is, especially when you have power parties in power that serve to squelch free speech, and how important it is to report what is actually happening, the importance of a free press, even at the risk of one's life, to get the truth out. And the men that are involved in this Raqqa is being slaughtered silently group, man, they have done extraordinary work, and this documentary is an absolutely necessary watch. City of Ghosts. And one of the things that really disturbed me about this documentary too is how ISIS has managed to incorporate Hollywood filmmaking techniques to create their own pro-ISIS propaganda videos to recruit people to their cause, especially young children. And they have like these slick production values and something that's like straight out of a movie, except that the people that are getting shot and killed in their ISIS videos are real people, and those are real bullets, and nothing is being faked or staged. And it's just mind-blowing. And this is a documentary that I absolutely recommend people to see. I will say that, a word of caution, you do see some extremely graphic footage, and but again, it is a necessary view, especially for those who seek to wreak havoc on free speech. So City of Ghosts is my favorite documentary of the year. Absolutely worth your time. For Amazon Prime users, please check it out as soon as you can. And so now that we have that out of the way, we can get into my top 20 favorite films of the year. And this list is actually alphabetical, except for my number one film, which I'll leave for last. So I'll be going through my list alphabetically from Z to A. And the reason why I have my list alphabetical is because I find that it's too much of a exercise in splitting hairs as figuring out, okay, what's number one versus number two, and then what's number three, and then what should I rank number four, and so on. It's just maddening to figure out like which film is better than the others. So to cut through all that rigmarole, I decided, hey, why don't I just alphabetize my list of films, the first 19, and then leave my number one film as the last one that I'll get into. So, with that said, we'll begin with the number 20 film on my list, going from Z to A, beginning with the extraordinary anime Your Name, which I reviewed earlier this year on the podcast. And this is a anime feature written and directed by Makoto Shinkai. And this is a stunning a stunning and gorgeous looking animated anime feature, and it tells a story of a high school girl named Mitsuha and a high school boy named Taki. And one day they just wake up and they find out that they've switched bodies. So Mitsuha wakes up in Taki's body, and Taki wakes up in Mitsuha's body, and they're figuring out, okay, what is going on? How do we deal with this, sudden gender swap? And so throughout the film, they actually try to figure out. They actually start figuring out, okay, who they switch bodies with, and so they leave clues to figure out, okay, how can I help you in your life, or how can you help me in my life, and how can I help you navigate, my day to day life, and so on. And so they kind of leave different clues, throughout the film to kind of help them, navigate their respective lives, so to speak. And this film is actually quite. It's such a treat to watch, and this film actually was in theaters for a few weeks this past spring, and this actually received enormous success in Japan, and I can see why. Like from the quality of the animation to the heartfelt story, this is a film that really stayed with me since I watched it, and now that it's available on Blu-ray and DVD, I will revisit it again. So, Your Name is one of my favorite films of the year at the number 20 spot. So absolutely recommend anyone to check that out. Number 19, going back from Z to A, is DC's one and only good film in their entire DCEU Extended Universe catalog, and that is Wonder Woman. And Wonder Woman, it's a film that is a true marvel, so to speak. A marvel in the sense that it's the first film in the DCEU since Man of Steel, Batman vs Superman, and Suicide Squad that manages to not be terrible like those aforementioned films. This film was directed by Patty Jenkins, and man, Patty Jenkins did such an extraordinary job. Bringing to cinematic life the character of Wonder Woman, the whole world of Themyscira, Steve Trevor, as well, and that entire world. When you bring the quintessential female superhero to the big screen, man, you got to come correct. And thankfully, Patty Jenkins came correct with this film. Gal Gadot, she was 100% awesome as Wonder Woman. She brought that confidence, that beauty, and also that strength of character that Wonder Woman exudes, in the comics, and she successfully fully realizes that character. And this is a film that is also a landmark too, for many reasons. For years you've heard studio executives who have claimed that, oh well, superhero films led by a female heroine can't sell, they don't profit. And for many years you could point to certain films that didn't do that, that didn't exactly refute that argument, such as Catwoman with Halle Berry, Jesus Christ, Elektra, Supergirl from 1984. What else? Yeah, those films didn't exactly inspire a lot of confidence when it came to heroines on the screen. But thankfully, Wonder Woman has set the bar, and I am absolutely looking forward to Wonder Woman 2, which will also be directed by Patty Jenkins. Looking forward to seeing what she can bring to the table with the sequel. Justice League, I know that film, has sort of, it's quite trash, but I do hope that as DC continues to move forward and Warner Brothers continues to move forward with their DC cinematic universe, that they can keep Wonder Woman in their new canon, ignore Batman vs Superman, Justice League, and Man of Steel, and keep Wonder Woman in the canon and then build from there, because this is a wonderful film, no pun intended, and the supporting cast is great, from Chris Pine as Steve Trevor, Etta Candy, who was played by Lucy Davis, Connie Nielsen as Queen Hippolyta, Danny Houston, Robin Wright, David Thewlis. Such a great film, and I recommend checking this out. And if for some reason you don't like Wonder Woman on cinema, then I can't talk to you. You need to have a stadium full of seats, girl. Bye. Carl says 19 though. Well, here's the thing, Carl. Like I said, this list is in alphabetical order, going from Z to A. So there's no preferential order, save for my number one film, which I will get into later on. So yeah, that's Wonder Woman. And next on my list for 20 favorite films of the year is War for the Planet of the Apes, the third film in the Planet of the Apes reboot trilogy. This film is the second one, directed by Matt Reeves. And what's great about this Planet of the Apes trilogy is that each successive film has been better than the previous one that came before it. So you had Rise of the Planet of the Apes, which came out in 2011, which was very good. And then you followed that up 3 years later with Dawn of the Planet of the Apes in 2014, which was even better. And then you have the best film of all, which came out this year with War for the Planet of the Apes. Man, Andy Serkis is extraordinary as Caesar. And, the motion capture technology used to capture his performance and combined with the quality of the visual effects of these photorealistic apes is just a stunning sight to see. And, it's definitely groundbreaking in its visual effects work. And Andy Serkis, man, just such a great job. I mean, this is one of the many Andy Serkis performances, especially like with his work as Gollum as well in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, where you can make a case of how there should be an awards category for best motion capture performance. And if there were, then Andy Serkis would be the Daniel Day-Lewis of that category because he's that good in this film. Woody Harrelson, who plays the Colonel, who plays the strongest and most calculating antagonist in this trilogy of films, and he has his own reasons for committing the atrocities that he does. And in his mind, his rationale is understandable, even though as horrifying as it may be. The supporting cast is also great. You have Karen Konoval, who plays Maurice, the orangutan, who is Caesar's main advisor and I guess lieutenant, if you will, his main counsel, who also has a wonderful story with a young human girl, who they come across in their journey. This is the War for the Planet of the Apes is a wonderful and pulse-pounding culmination of the reboot trilogy of Planet of the Apes films. Now, I won't give any spoilers, but there is enough material to begin perhaps a new series of Planet of the Apes films. Although, if they decide to end the whole trilogy or the whole series rather with just War for the Planet of the Apes, if this is indeed the whole conclusion, then I am 100% for that, because I am a fan of conclusively ending stories instead of just dragging them out like The Walking Dead, for example. So if this is the end, then what a hell of an ending it is. But if they are going to continue it, then they do have enough ample material to do so. So that's War for the Planet of the Apes. And we have Jennifer Green on the chat. Hello there. Thank you for joining us. We do have another film on my list here as well, which I did mention twice on the podcast. And this is a film that I really didn't have a chance to review in full. But next on my list and on my 20 favorite films of the year is 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. And this film stars Frances McDormand, Woody Harrelson, Sam Rockwell, John Hawkes, Peter Dinklage, and Lucas Hedges. And this was written and directed by Martin McDonagh, who directed such films as In Bruges with Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson, as well as Seven Psychopaths with Sam Rockwell and Christopher Walken. And 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. It's a film that, as I mentioned before on the podcast, it's a film that kind of hits every line on the Victor movie bingo card. You have a film that has tragedy. It has a character dealing with a terminal illness. It has a sort of dark, depressing tone and some dark humor. And yeah, it's a film that on the surface, it's pretty much like the quintessential Victor movie, as Carl would like to point out. But this is a film that I absolutely loved, and in terms of the quality of its script, to the performance from Frances McDormand, which is one of the best I've seen from her. Three Billboards. It's a rather darkly comic and tragic story, and it follows the story of Frances McDormand's character, who plays a mother who's dealing with the vicious and brutal death, the killing rather, of her daughter, and so she's dealing with the fact that not only has her daughter died in tragic fashion, but the fact that the police have not solved her daughter's murder. And so she's figuring out, okay, it's been a year since my daughter died, so what do I do? How can I keep the police accountable? How can I keep them trying to solve this case? So she decides to rent out 3 billboards outside her small town of Ebbing, Missouri. And she rents out these 3 billboards, which directly calls out Woody Harrelson's character, Chief Willoughby, who looks at this and he's trying to figure out, okay, well, all right, now you have my attention. You're using these billboards to, sort of throw shade on me and my police force, and we're trying our best to try to solve your daughter's murder. And so Frances McDormand's trying to, put his feet to the fire, as well as the rest of the police force's feet to the fire in solving this case. And what's great about this film is that it successfully skirts the line between dark comedy and genuine pathos. And Martin McDonagh's script is very intelligent. It's full of charm, and it's also full of like sharp writing as well. And Sam Rockwell plays this shitheel, racist ass cop whose hobbies include harassing the black residents in this small town and being an overall shithead. And his character also has some layers to him as well. So, and what's great about 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, is that it's a film that goes in rather unexpected directions that feels right, and it always keeps you on your toes. So you're not really entirely sure where this story is going to go or how it's going to end and how these characters are going to be affected. But it's a film that really, that for me, it absolutely resonates. And like I said, from the quality of its writing to its directing and performances, it's a film that I absolutely recommend. It's such a joy, and I can't wait to revisit it again. And it's definitely one of Martin McDonagh's best films. Would I rank it above In Bruges, which was my favorite film for Martin McDonagh? You know what? I'm gonna say yes. And that's no knock on In Bruges, because In Bruges is a great film still. I'm gonna say that's my number 2 favorite film for Martin McDonagh, with 3 Billboards being my number 1 and 7 Psychopaths being number 3. So again, 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. I absolutely give that my highest recommendation. Check that out. It's still in theaters now. Carl Byrd has responded to my choice there. He says, "Depressing ass movies. LOL. You need some sunshine in your life." Listen, Carl, I have plenty of sunshine in my life. All right. I mean, I'm Mr. Sunshine. I mean, come on. I mean, first of all, I need to put this meme to rest. There's been this ongoing meme since we've started this podcast about, Victor likes movies with characters with terminal cancer, or Victor likes depressing movies that makes you slit your wrists. Listen, man, come on. It just so happens, just because I'd say 30% of the okay, maybe 40% of the movies that I review in this podcast have dark themes, it doesn't mean that every single film that I watch, falls in that same umbrella. There are plenty of movies, especially on this list, that are full of sunshine and joy and sunshine and daisies and puppies and kittens. All right? Damn it. Don't judge me. Anyway, speaking of happiness and sunshine and daisies, that brings us to the next film on my list here. And it's a film that I absolutely adore. And it's a film that has received some polarizing reactions for some reason. And that is, right here, blam, Star Wars, The Last Jedi. Yes, I purchased the art book, The Art of Star Wars: The Last Jedi, which is absolutely worth checking out. What can I say about The Last Jedi, that I didn't say last week? I gotta say, for me, it's a film that's even better than The Force Awakens. I loved the unexpected directions that this film went, and it's these same unexpected directions that is the cause of such ire and such fervor from what appears to be many fans in the in the Star Wars fandom, which have taken rather strong umbrage to The Last Jedi. There are many fans who claim that this is not their Star Wars film. Hashtag not my Star Wars. There are some fans out there who claim that this film is an insult that, flies in the face of the mythology of Star Wars. And there are some who have made this rather bullshit claim that the prequel trilogy is better than The Last Jedi. To those people, have a stadium, have a coliseum full of seats, okay, for making such an asinine statement. The Last Jedi, it's a rather risky Star Wars film, and Rian Johnson did such a tremendous job in, taking the Star Wars mythology and the Star Wars franchise in rather unexpected directions and doing it in a way that is done very well. It's one thing to do something totally different than the norm. It's another thing to do something totally different from the norm and doing it absolutely well and in a way that absolutely stays true to the franchise and stays true to the lore that has come before it for the past 40 years. And The Last Jedi is a film that is absolutely needed in the Star Wars canon, a film that could have very easily have been a remix of The Empire Strikes Back, much like The Force Awakens is a remix of A New Hope. And don't get me wrong, I still love The Force Awakens, but The Last Jedi is the film that we need because we always complain, as fans, we always complain about, why are big budget movies so predictable? Why are tentpole films, so conventional? Why do they give us the unexpected? Why do they always take the safe route? This film does not take the safe route, and I think we are all better for it. So, The Last Jedi is on my list for top 20 favorite films of the year, and it definitely earns its spot there. I cannot wait until 2019 when we do get episode 9, which will, hopefully bring this sequel trilogy to a successful and powerful conclusion, and I have no doubt that it will. So there it is, The Last Jedi. We got a couple comments here. Big shout outs to Nick Quattrini. Thank you for joining us. He did say that he wanted to see 3 billboards. Also, The Lady with the Funny Eye. To the Bone on and he also says, To the Bone on Netflix was a little depressing but good. I haven't seen that, but I will check that out. I thought it was cancer, but it was about anorexia, and I felt horrible because I was eating lunch. Well, okay, I could totally see why. I will check out To the Bone for sure. Nick Quattrini also says that, quote, I really liked Last Jedi, but I heard that they cut Mark Hamill out, and he didn't see this until premiere night. Well, that's rather interesting. Speaking of Mark Hamill, he did say that during filming of The Last Jedi, he did say to Rian Johnson that he disagreed with everything that Rian Johnson wrote, how he wrote Mark Hamill's character Luke Skywalker, but Mark Hamill said that I'll do my best to help you fully realize your vision. And boy, Mark Hamill did. And I will go so far as to say that Mark Hamill's performance as Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi deserves some awards contention. I wouldn't mind if he was nominated as Best Supporting Actor. I would not mind at all. So there it is. So that's number 16. Next on my list, going from Z to A, on my list is The Square. The Square is a foreign language film. It's a Swedish film written and directed by Ruben Östlund, which stars Claes Spang and Elizabeth Moss and Dominic West. And this is a film that I reviewed a few weeks ago on the podcast, and it's a film whose plot is rather hard to describe, but it's a film that focuses on absurd, cringe-worthy humor. And it's a film that lampoons the pretentiousness of the art world, specifically like modern art, and also the whole pretentiousness surrounding certain art circles. And it kind of like, pokes fun at the whole veneer of sophistication, the veneer of, the veneer of having like this cultured cosmopolitan, stance, or this cosmopolitan veneer, if you will, and how now people use that as a barrier to mask their rather base desires, or rather base instincts or tastes. And The Square is a film that I find it rather hilarious. It's a film that it's rather episodic in its plot, and it's a film that it kind of makes you squirm in your seat. There are several scenes in this film that you kind of laugh out of nervousness, and because much of the humor is rather, it can kind of border on inappropriate, but also rather dark as well. And like I said, it's a film that's hard to describe. It's a film that the less you know going in, the more enjoyment you'll get out of it. And it's a film that I absolutely adore. And yes, Carl, it is the film that has the guy that acted like a monkey in it. It's The Square. Yes, there is a scene in The Square which there's this guy who invades this dinner party, and as a rather twisted form of performance art, he acts like a monkey. So he's like jumping on tables, grunting like a 300-pound gorilla, and he's like dragging people across their hair. He's putting people in chokeholds, and he's like throwing silverware all over the place. And that whole scene is like kind of puts the whole bystander effect to the test. Like if you see somebody acting extremely violently and unusually, like how far would you go before you end up stepping up and saying something or doing something? So yeah, that's The Square. And when it comes out on Blu-ray and DVD, hopefully it'll make its way on Netflix or Amazon or some other streaming platform, because it's absolutely worth your time. And yeah, it's a one of a kind film. The next film on my list is a film directed by Martin Scorsese, and this is a film that I actually reviewed in detail on an episode of Victor's Corner way back in January, and it's his latest film called Silence. And Silence is a film directed by Scorsese, stars Adam Driver, Andrew Garfield, and Liam Neeson, and it's the film about this group of Jesuit priests that tried to spread Christianity in 16th century Japan, and they're in Japan trying to find their missing mentor, played by Liam Neeson. And as they do, they discover that their Christian faith is deeply at odds with the Japanese culture that they encounter, and the whole film is a rather challenging examination of not only religious faith, but also how one's religious faith can be tested in the face of such insurmountable odds. And it's a film that offers no easy answers, and it offers no easy questions. So whether you're of the religious faith, or whether you're agnostic or non-religious or spiritual, this is a film that has something for everybody. This is the type of religious film that I can get with. It's a film that does not provide any easy questions. It doesn't proselytize. It's not preachy. It's a film that very much offers these tough questions and leaves you to think for yourself as to what you make of these questions, and as to what you make of these characters and the actions that they take in this film. And it's definitely one of Martin Scorsese's strongest films in his catalog. And I wish that this film actually got more success and more praise than it did. But now that it's on Blu-ray and DVD, and I think you can find it on streaming services, I think on Amazon as well, or Hulu, you should definitely check it out. And especially if you're a fan of Martin Scorsese's work, because this is one of his best films. So yeah, check it out, Silence. And if you want my full review of that film, check out my Victor's Corner episode back in January. My next film on my list, number 13, is a film that I had the pleasure of watching just last Friday, and it is Guillermo del Toro's latest feature, The Shape of Water. The Shape of Water stars Sally Hawkins, Michael Shannon, Richard Jenkins, Michael Stuhlbarg, Octavia Spencer, and Doug Jones. And this film, it's an extraordinary film, and it's set in 1962 in Baltimore, and it's about this woman named Eliza, played by Sally Hawkins, and she's totally mute, and she works as a custodian in this top secret Baltimore government laboratory facility, and they've captured this amphibious man played by Doug Jones, and this amphibious man doesn't speak, but he kind of looks like a cousin of Doug Jones' character Abe Sapien from the Hellboy films, the same amphibious creature, and and uh, and this woman Eliza uh, actually falls in love with this amphibious fishman creature, and this fishman creature has the same feelings for her. And throughout the film, you kind of see how their relationship and their connection evolves. And Michael Shannon plays this douchebag character, Colonel Richard Strickland, who is in charge of the security of this facility, and he's torturing this amphibious man. And throughout the film, Sally Hawkins and this fishman are trying to figure out a way to escape and manage to figure out a way to stay together, so to speak. It's a rather unconventional film. Sup, Kyle? Thank you for joining us on the chat. It's a rather unconventional film, and it's a rather extraordinary love story that focuses on people, within the margins of society. So you have this mute character who very much can speak for herself. She uses sign language, but she's a rather strong-willed character in her own right. You have Octavia Spencer, who plays her best friend slash coworker, who always looks out for her as well. You have Richard Jenkins' character, who plays this guy named Giles, who's this closeted commercial artist who lives next door to Sally Hawkins' character, and he's also like her best friend. And he has his own subplot, which is rather eye-opening as well. And you learn like how he's trying to survive on the margins as well, being one of the downtrodden, or rather the overlooked in society as well. And this is a film that not only is a sort of a love letter to the marginalized, as if you will, but it's also a rather intriguing science fiction story, which visually speaking reminds me a lot of BioShock in terms of its dark green and brownish color scheme. When you have this facility, with the aquatic imagery, the dark green water that you see throughout the film. The lighting, it does kind of remind, and of course the setting being in 1962, it does remind me of the video game BioShock, which has many of the same, Art Deco 60s art style as well. And for me, like as a video gamer, this is the closest that we'll see to a BioShock, film, realized on screen, at least visually. And so, that's courtesy of the cinematographer Dan Laustsen, who also was a DP for Guillermo del Toro's film Crimson Peak, as well as another film which will be on my list as well. Also, the score by Alexander Desplat is also very delightful as well. And The Shape of Water, it's a film that I would say is Guillermo del Toro's best film since Pan's Labyrinth 11 years ago. And it's a film that I can't wait to watch again. Hopefully, the Criterion Collection can get their hands on The Shape of Water, because it's very much worthy. It very much would be a worthy addition to their catalog. The Shape of Water has just come out in theaters in Rhode Island, so if you haven't had the chance to see it, please do so. I might go see it again because it's that good. And yeah, Sally Hawkins gives a great performance. I think she should be nominated for the Academy Award for Best Actress, or at least one of the nominees. And Doug Jones, man, Doug Jones is so terrific. Like the way he conveys emotion through body language alone, like if through that costume as the amphibious man, he deserves equal praise as well. So yes, check it out, The Shape of Water. It's available in theaters now. So we are down to my number 12 on my list here, and this is a film that I also mentioned a few times on the podcast, and it's available on the Criterion Collection, and it is Personal Shopper, starring Kristen Stewart. And Personal Shopper, it's a film that is written and directed by Olivier Assayas, who also directed Clouds of Sils Maria, which also stars Kristen Stewart. And it's a film that has a rather, I'd say it's a plot that's rather hard to describe, but it's also a film that it's also an extraordinary art house film that's very much worth your time. This film stars Kristen Stewart, who plays this woman named Maureen, who's a spirit medium as well as a personal shopper for this well-known celebrity. And so what she does is what Kristen Stewart's character Maureen does is she goes to different stores across Europe and buys all sorts of expensive clothes and jewelry and all sorts of other accoutrements for this celebrity that she works with. And so that's her main 9 to 5. And so her side job is that she works as this spirit medium, and she's still working through the grief of the death of her brother, her twin brother, who died of a heart attack. And she has the same heart condition that her brother has. And so throughout the film, she's trying to reconnect with her brother using her abilities as a spirit medium to do so, trying to reach to him across from the, ethereal plane. And the whole film is a rather interesting study in this woman's grief and how far she goes to establish this connection between herself and her dead brother. And it's a film that it's a ghost story, which is a rather unconventional example of a ghost story, because there are certain elements to the film which are rather tense, and it kind of leaves you on the edge of your seat, and you're not sure where this film is going to go. For example, there's a rather suspense-filled scene in the film which involves just text messaging. And there's a film where Maureen is sitting on a train, and she's getting these menacing text messages from this unknown address. And each message is becoming more and more disturbing and more threatening than the last. And even though it's just text on a screen on her smartphone, you still kind of recoil in your seat because you're not too sure where this is going to go. You're not too sure where, Maureen's journey is going to take her, and who this mysterious assailant is on the other end of the line. And what's also interesting about this film, Personal Shopper, is that, all the way to the ending, which I won't spoil, you're not too sure whether or not, the various signs that she sees throughout the film, whether or not there is a ghost, whether or not her brother is reaching out for her, or whether or not her grief is dictating, her, self-confirming awareness, if you will. Like she's seeing signs of her dead brother because she wants to see them. Maybe that's true. Or maybe her brother is trying to reach out from her from the spiritual plane, and she doesn't know exactly how to reach back to him. There's enough evidence in this film to suggest either viewpoint, and it's a film that offers plenty of rewards in its narrative the more you watch it. And and it's a film that for me delivers, like my favorite performance from an actress, Kristen Stewart. She's a terrific actress as well. If you only know her from the Twilight films, then you really are missing out on a lot of good stuff, because Kristen Stewart has made some terrific choices as an actress, and Personal Shopper is one of them. I'd say that this is the best performance I've seen her do, as well as her previous collaboration with Olivia Assayas, Clouds of Sils Maria. Personal Shopper is one of my favorite films of the year. Also features one of my favorite performances of the year from Kristen Stewart. Well worth checking out. It's on the Criterion Collection. See it if you have not done so. Next on my list, number 11, is Okja. Okja is a Netflix film which I reviewed earlier this year. It's a film written and directed by Bong Joon-ho, who's a South Korean filmmaker who did such films as Snowpiercer, which is an awesome science fiction film based on the graphic novel series of the same name. And he also did a film called, I think it was The Host, which was also an interesting sci-fi monster film. And Okja is a rather interesting science fiction film, which also stars Paul Dano, Jake Gyllenhaal, Steven Yeun, Tilda Swinton, and An Seo-hyun, who plays the main character Miha. And Okja is a film which is about this world where Tilda Swinton, who plays this CEO who's genetically engineered this animal called the super pig. And a super pig is like this giant hybrid that visually looks like a giant hybrid between a pig and a giant hippopotamus. And these super pigs are used as the number one food source for meat in the world that this film takes place in. And Miha is this young girl who has one of these super pigs as this pet. And when she finds out that this same company is coming to collect, is about to take away her pig, she goes on this globetrotting quest to get back her pet slash friend, best friend. And it's a film that offers a rather interesting commentary on many themes, such as the ethics of meat consumption, also the ethics of genetically engineered animals and harvesting them for meat or protein or foodstuffs. Also, also touches on the food industry's penchant for creating overly processed foods, which probably do more harm than good in the long run. Also makes a good case for eating organically, and also makes the case for why you shouldn't eat trans fat laced and GMO laced foods, Carl. Anyway, this film is also visually stunning. It has excellent cinematography from Darius Kanji. Darius Kanji is also an extraordinary cinematographer. He also did such films as The Lost City of Zed, which is breathtakingly gorgeous. You can also find that film for free on Amazon Prime. You can also watch that streaming. And the cinematography in Okja is absolutely extraordinary because it was filmed on 4K red cameras. So if you happen to have a 4K television, it just looks absolutely mind blowing. Even if you have a 1080p display, it looks absolutely crisp. And every single fine detail, from like the lush rural jungle locales of South Korea to the urban sprawl of the various cities that they globetrot in, it's just a joy to watch. And Okja is a film that has a message and delivers it well. And it's a rather unique science fiction film, and it does feature one of my favorite performances from Tilda Swinton, who makes rather bold choices as an actress, and we love her for it. Carl Byrd said in my response to my GMO trans fats comments, he says, "I eat what makes me happy." Yes, you do. You do, Carl. But you need to get off that train. You need to eat organically, my friend. You know what? Come on, Carl, take a trip with me to Whole Foods. Take a trip with me to Trader Joe's. All right, I can give you a shopping list of what to buy, man. Stay woke. You gotta stay. When it comes to diet, when it comes to proper eating habits, stay woke. And Afton has joined us on the chat. And no, you cannot see up my nose. All right, stop trying to make me feel all self-conscious on camera. All right. Anyway, yeah. So yeah, that's number 11. And now we're getting into my top 10, the second half of my list. So we're moving right along here. Number 10 on my list is, for me, the best superhero film that has not only come out this year, but also one of the very best examples of the superhero genre. And this film is Logan. And Logan is a film which is not only, for me, the best X-Men themed film or film set in the X-Men universe, but also features three of the best acting performances I've seen from Hugh Jackman, Sir Patrick Stewart, and Daphne Keane, who plays Laura, or X-23, the daughter of Wolverine. Man, Logan is an extraordinary feature for several reasons, because this is a film that directed by James Mangold, who also directed The Wolverine in 2013. It's a film that is not only an extraordinary swan song to Hugh Jackman's role as Wolverine, who has been playing that character for 18 years since X-Men, the first X-Men film in 2000, but Hugh Jackman also delivers his best performance, his best turn as Wolverine in this film. And this film is a loose adaptation of the comic series Old Man Logan, written by Mark Miller. And it's a film that takes place in the year 2029, where Hugh Jackman's character Logan is basically at the end of his rope physically. He's old. He's basically over 2 centuries old at that point. His body is breaking down on him. His healing factor can't heal as fast as it used to. So he's basically dying slowly. And Patrick Stewart also gives an extraordinary turn, in my view, the best turn, as Professor Charles Xavier, who was an extraordinary, brilliant mind. And now he's, reduced to being like this broken down old man in his 90s who's suffering from dementia. And when you have like the greatest telepathic mind suffering from dementia and perhaps early onset Alzheimer's, then you do see some rather terrifying effects as a result of that, breakdown of his powers. And it's a film that sees two extraordinary people at the far past their prime and at the end of their rope, and they're struggling to survive. And on the one hand, that could be the story of the Dallas Cowboys, but no, this is a story that is much more serious and has much more gravity. And the film also, and the film is also an example of a film that is a strong deconstruction of the superhero film genre, because it's a film that kind of, in a way, reveals the very limitations of the superhero film genre, in the sense that in terms of its acting performances, you don't see a lot of acting performances in superhero films that make you go, man, that was awesome, or man, this person deserves an Academy Award or an award because his acting was that good. Like, you can point to like a handful of examples, like of course the late great Heath Ledger as Joker in The Dark Knight, Hugh Jackman in this film, and Sir Patrick Stewart. But it's a film that like shows how in terms of like on an acting level or a performance level, how limited the superhero film genre is. And Logan kind of, transcends those limitations in a major way through the quality of its performances. Also, Daphne Keane, who plays X-23, and this is her debut performance. She's like young. She's like probably like no more like 10, 11 years old. And she plays a vicious character who inherits every bit of the ferocity of Wolverine, but also is very much her own character. And from what I hear, James Mangold is actually in the process of writing a screenplay for an X-23 film. And I really hope that film does continue the tone that Logan sets. I also like the fact that this is the final film of Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, because this is an extraordinary way to go. And if it were the case where Fox, now that they're owned by Disney, if they try to bring back Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, that will be such a slap in the face and an insult to this film, because this film is an extraordinary conclusion to not only Wolverine, not only Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, but also an extraordinary conclusion to that whole X-Men film universe featuring Wolverine. But also this is a very good standalone film. So it's a film that in terms of its continuity, it does exist separately outside of the X-Men film universe. So it's very much its own beast. So it's not really beholden to the previous X-Men films. So again, which makes it that much stronger. So Logan is number 10 on my list. Maybe at some point I'd like to give a deeper dive into Logan as a whole, because there's a lot more that I do want to say about it. Perhaps in a future installment of Victor's Corner, I can dig into it more. But again, an extraordinary feature. Hugh Jackman and Sir Patrick Stewart deserve recognition for their performances, especially, and also Daphne Keane as well. Also, next on my list is a film that I briefly mentioned last week on the podcast. Number 9 is Lady Byrd. Lady Byrd is written and directed by Greta Gerwig, and that film stars Saoirse Ronan as the title character, Christine Lady Byrd McPherson, and the film also stars Laurie Metcalf as her mom. And the whole film, Lady Byrd, is a coming-of-age story written and directed by Greta Gerwig, and it's sort of like it can be seen as like a sort of a semi-autobiographical tale, because Gerwig did grow up in Sacramento, California, and so this film could kind of be seen as like her semi-autobiographical take. And Saoirse Ronan gives a great performance as the title character, who's like the self-absorbed teenager who's who's like on her way to college, and she's trying to navigate her last year of high school. And she's dealing with like typical high school stuff, like dealing with high school crushes, trying to make the grade, also trying to find herself, if you will. And the film is a wonderful comedy, coming of age comedy. It's full of great dialogue, and a great performance by Saoirse Ronan, perhaps the best performance I've seen her. And Saoirse Ronan, like, she's been coming up in a major way as an actress, from her 2015 film Brooklyn, which is very good, even all the way back to her debut performance in 2007 in the film Atonement. She's definitely on the come up as one of the major young actresses to see, and man, she does great work in this film. Greta Gerwig writes a great script, like I said, full of great dialogue and great moments, which feels very true to life. I really think that Greta Gerwig should be recognized as a director and as a screenwriter in this awards cycle. And given how good this film Lady Byrd is, I really want to see more work from Greta Gerwig as well. And I do want to go back and watch some of the films that she starred in. Like, I still haven't seen Frances Ha, which was directed by Noah Baumbach, and she stars in that film. And I heard that was very good. That was also on the Criterion Collection as well as on Netflix. So I might check that out as well. Afton says Wizard of Oz. I don't know what Wizard of Oz is in reference to. If you're talking, I don't think Saoirse Ronan was in Wizard of Oz. You might be thinking of Emma Stone. No, Mila Kunis. Mila Kunis was in Oz the Great and Powerful. That was the last Oz theme film that came out. But yeah, check out Lady Byrd. Lady Byrd is still in theaters now. Number 8. Number 8 is a film that I reviewed earlier this year, this past February, in fact, and it is a sequel. John Wick, Chapter 2. Very pleased that this film managed to stay on my top 20 list all year. This is the direct sequel to the 2014 film John Wick, starring Keanu Reeves as the world's most pissed off dog owner. This film is full of bullets and headshots galore. John Wick commits more headshots than a homicidal photographer, and it's a film that is full of killer action, creatively staged action as well, and also features some great action cinematography from Dan Laustin as well, who also did the cinematography for The Shape of Water. And if you haven't seen John Wick Chapter 1, then you need to see that, because that film bleeds into this film. And you know what? I cannot wait until John Wick Chapter 3. I think Chapter 3 comes out in 2019. And you know what? I can't wait for that, because it's going to be a hell of a trilogy. Keanu Reeves is definitely one of the great action stars. If you look at the first Matrix film, and of course Point Break, who doesn't like the first Point Break? Yeah, I mean, I can't say anything more about John Wick Chapter 2. It speaks for itself. Go watch it if you're a fan of action films. And if you're not a fan of John Wick Chapter 2, then there's something wrong with your brain. Next on my list, moving backwards alphabetically, this is a film that I am so pleased to have watched. I've seen this film 3 times now. Actually, no, 4 times. And it's a film written and directed by Jordan Peele, and it's called Get Out. Get Out is a film that it's a film which screenplay by Jordan Peele is full of rich layers. It's full of rich textual themes of racism, specifically that left wing, well-meaning liberal racism, that passive aggressive form of prejudice as well. It's a film that's very much a social thriller, a suspense film. It's got touches of comedy in it, It's an outright horror film, especially in its last third. Um, Man, it's a film that for me has the best original screenplay of the year. And Jordan Peele, man, he his screenplay is incredibly tight. And Daniel Kaluuya, who plays the main character Chris, he also did some fine work here as the main character, who's the lone black person in this secluded suburbs. And you know what they say? In the suburbs, no one can hear you scream, and it's very much true for this film. Uh, it's a film that is that you can just break down and analyze from start to finish. And I did get into a little bit of an analysis when I mentioned a few weeks ago about the Jordan Peele's video that he did on Vanity Fair on YouTube when he broke down certain fan theories concerning Get Out. And I do want to break down this film in even more detail. So perhaps there will be a future Victor's Corner where I'll actually focus on this film specifically and break down, why it's so, rich in its textual themes. Also, yes, you're welcome, Carl. I did remind Carl to pick up the John Wick comic, which is out in stores now. John Wick issue 1, which I believe is a prequel to the first film. So yes, if you haven't seen Get Out, I absolutely recommend it. And if you do get your hands on the Blu-ray or DVD, definitely listen to the commentary track by Jordan Peele, who also manages to break down many of the themes in the film in greater detail. And it's a film that is absolutely extraordinary from a creative standpoint, from a screenwriting standpoint. Man, I really want to get my hands on the screenplay so I can actually sit down and actually read through it and just glean some ideas from it myself. It's definitely one of those films that inspires me to actually get out and actually make something creative, whether it's writing down a short story or a screenplay, something. It's one of those creative films that inspires you to go out and create. And I think that's what some of the best art does. And Get Out definitely fits the bill. All right, so we're running down to my final five of my top 20 favorite films of the year. Moving right along, and number 5 on my list is a film that I reviewed just a couple weeks ago on the podcast, and that is Sean Baker's The Florida Project. The Florida Project is a film that I talked about, which focuses on poor people on the margins, specifically this young 6-year-old girl named Mooney and her ratchet ass mom living in this motel, this garish motel in the fringes of society in Florida, and how this just blocks away from the extraordinary, beautiful excess of Disney World. And it's a film that focuses on people on the margins, and it's their day to day and how they manage to survive. And it's a film that features characters that are tough to love, but you also feel enormous empathy and sympathy for them. And it's a film that's full of great performances too. Willem Dafoe, who plays the main manager of the motel, who's pretty much at his wit's end throughout the film, but you could tell that he really cares a lot about the kids and the residents that live at this motel, and he's always looking out for them. Bria Vinite, who makes her debut in this film, who plays a rather ratchet ass, unfit mom who has no business babysitting kids, much less raising her own. Her performance was absolutely solid, and I was absolutely impressed. I was amazed at the fact that she was just an Instagram model, and she was discovered by Sean Baker, and that's how she managed to get into this film. So again, like I said, all you thirst traps out there on social media, Instagram, hey, you know what? You too can be discovered by a talented filmmaker. So you have hope out there. # goals. So yeah, and also you can't forget the main actress, Brooklyn Prince, who plays the main character Mooney, who plays the 6-year-old girl who is just enormously, just on some level enormously awful, but you kind of understand why she is the way she is. I mean, she's young, and when you're growing up in that environment, when you don't have a lot of options, you're not going to exactly be like Miss Goody Two Shoes. So you can understand why these kids are awful and why you wouldn't want to deal with them. But the Florida Project is absolutely a wonder of a film, and Sean Baker, he's one of the most unique voices that I've seen in independent cinema. And if you haven't seen this film, I recommend checking it out. Also, check out his 2015 film, which is available on Netflix, called Tangerine. Also, very much worth your time. All right. Oof, this is like a workout. This is going longer than I expected. Anyway, we have number 4 on my list, and number 4 is a film that I am very pleased to have watched, and this is one of Christopher Nolan's finest films, and I think, in my view, his finest film as a director, and it is Dunkirk. Dunkirk, which is an extraordinary war film, and it tells the story of 400,000 men, British troops, British, Belgian, and French troops who are stranded on the beaches of Dunkirk, France. And the film is told in 3 distinct parts, which are interwoven throughout the film. So you have one part which focuses on the soldiers who are stranded on the beach, and that takes place over the span of 1 week. Then you have an extraordinary segment where you have all these civilian boats, which actually travel to Dunkirk amidst the war ravaged waters. You have these civilians traveling towards Dunkirk, trying to rescue as many soldiers as they can off the beach, and that takes place over the span of 1 day. Then you have the airplane segment, which focuses on this pilot played by Tom Hardy and his efforts into repelling the German forces from the air, and that takes place over the span of 1 hour. And so all those time periods are interwoven throughout the film, and from a logistical standpoint, it's an extraordinary feat by Christopher Nolan, and how he manages to balance all of those 3 segments together in rather seamless fashion. And the filmmaking on tap is absolutely wonderful. The cinematographer for this film is Hoyt van Hoytema, who was his previous collaborator on Interstellar. And the film was shot entirely on IMAX 70 millimeter of a large film format, and I actually had the great pleasure of seeing this film in IMAX, and it is an extraordinary joy to behold. And man, like the way that it's filmed, it's like you are placed right there on the sands with those soldiers who are desperate to escape, desperate to avoid death at every single minute of every single turn. And also too, the performances throughout the film, it's an ensemble piece, but some of the performances are rather extraordinary. For example, Kenneth Branagh, also Mark Rylance, who plays one of the boaters who actually travels on his small vessel with his 2 sons to rescue as many British soldiers as he can. You can see, like in Mark Rylance's face, that it's something that perhaps on some level he doesn't want to do, but he feels that he has to answer the call as a civilian, as a British national. He has to answer the call, and he figures, well, you know what, I may not be a soldier, but I'm going to do my part to aid in this war and rescue our boys. And his performance is rather subtle and also very powerful in its own right. And Kenneth Branagh, he also delivers a very good turn as well in his brief appearance in this film. Also, Dunkirk features an amazing score by Hans Zimmer, and Hans Zimmer, man, his score in this film is also a work of art, because he uses a ticking stopwatch leitmotif. So you hear the constant ticking throughout the soundtrack, and as you're watching the film, when the film hits its high notes and it's like bass heavy tones. The score throughout Dunkirk is nonstop, so the music never stops throughout the film. So it also adds to the unrelenting chaos that you experience along with these characters in this film, and so taken together as a whole package, from a technical level, a filmmaking level, a performance level, cinematography, score. directing, Dunkirk has it all. And I think that in terms of directing, this is Christopher Nolan's best film as a director. I still would rank some other films as higher than this as in terms of personal preference. I would rank like The Dark Knight and Inception and Interstellar as perhaps above this, but this is clearly one of the best films of the year. And I strongly believe that Christopher Nolan deserves an Academy Award for directing for Dunkirk. And I think it's still extraordinary that in and of itself that Christopher Nolan has never been nominated for Best Director at the Oscars. And if he doesn't win Best Director for this film, then there's something wrong with the Academy for sure. But yeah, Dunkirk, an absolute marvel of a film. Please check it out. Number three. Number three is a film that I'm surprised, which I'm rather disappointed that it hasn't received as much notice or as much praise going toward the end of this year. Although it did receive tremendous praise when it came out, but it sort of like fizzled out afterwards. My number three film is Detroit. And Detroit was a film that I reviewed this past August on the podcast. And this film is based on the Algiers Motel incident during Detroit's 1967 12th Street riots, which involved several African Americans as well as the Detroit Police Department. And this is a film that even though it depicts an incident which takes place over 50 years ago, that exact same incident could very well take place today, because this film touches on police brutality, touches on racism, discrimination, and it also shows just how much progress that we still need to make in terms of race relations. I mean, Detroit is a film which was directed by Catherine Bigelow, and who also directed Zero Dark 30 and The Hurt Locker, and it's also written by Mark Bowl. And Detroit is a film that is just absolutely a necessary viewing experience. It touches on racism in a major way that's still all too relevant and all too heartbreaking and all too tragic in our days and times. The film stars John Boyega, Algie Smith, Jason Mitchell, and also Anthony Mackie, and also Will Poulter. And Will Poulter, god damn it, I fucking hated his character in this film, because Will Poulter plays this racist ass douchebag fuckface cop who's one of the absolute worst motherfuckers I've seen on screen. I mean, yeah, it's his character is so evil, so unrepentant, so racist, so hateful, so man, every time I saw his character on screen, my blood pressure built, because his character was just so loathsome, and the shit that he pulls in this film is just angering, and it doesn't, and he plays such a dirty cop in this film that if you have any animosity towards the police, this film his character will not help you in that respect. Man, you know what? I'm getting ahead of myself, because that's how powerful Will Poulter's performance is in that film. I mean, and I think Will Poulter deserves an Oscar nomination for his performance in Detroit, because he was that good. And I gotta say, man, Detroit is a film that, you know, as upsetting as it is, it's still all too relevant to our current, you know, social and political climate. And it's a film that is available on Blu-ray and DVD, and I absolutely recommend people to check it out and have a dialogue, have a discussion, you know, with friends, and, you know, talk about the film and the issues and the questions that it raises, because it very much is a necessary film. And Catherine Bigelow, you know, does such a great job directing, and, you know, she's one of the best filmmakers that we have today. But yeah, and if my reaction to that film is of any indication, it's not a film that I don't recommend watching Detroit if you're in the mood for a feel-good experience, because it's not a feel-good experience. Some films aren't a feel-good experience, but it's well done, it's well made, and like I said, you have to see it, because it's a film that encourages you to stay woke. If nothing else, especially in these current days and times, staying woke is the most important thing of all. All right. Okay, so we're almost done here. We're at our number two spot. Number two on my list of top 20 favorite films of the year is Disney Pixar's latest feature, Coco. Coco is a film that I reviewed a couple weeks ago on the podcast as well. And it's a film that follows a 12-year-old boy named Miguel, whose family lives in Mexico, and he's accidentally transported to the land of the dead on the Day of the Dead, and he's trying to connect with his great grandfather, who was this famous musician, and he wants to be a musician as well. Unfortunately, since his great grandfather stepped out on his great grandmother, his family has banned music from their family, so they decided to get into shoemaking, and so young Miguel decides, well, you know what, shoemaking is not for me. I want to perform music. I want to play music. I want to write music because I'm an artist, and that's my art, and I gotta discover my art. I gotta cultivate my craft. And so that's what Miguel does, and throughout the film, you kind of see how his journey unfolds. And visually, like it's a rather delightful film to watch. It's an absolutely gorgeous and splendid film visually. Pixar is no stranger to doing fully detailed films that also hit you emotionally as well. And I gotta say, Coco was a film that made me cry. I mean, even early on in the film, I was choking back tears because there was one character who's going through something, who's going through her own personal issue, and that kind of made my eye twitch. But I managed to suck back tears throughout the film. But then when the film reached its conclusion, when it unfolded in its last third, I couldn't help but crying, man. The tears just streamed down my face like a waterfall. I had a hard lump in my throat. This film made me cry. This film hit me in my deepest feels. And when you watch this film, Coco, you will understand why. Mind you, in the screening that I watched this film in, you heard sniffling and tears all over the auditorium. So it wasn't just me. So yes. Yes, thank you, Afton. I agree. You know, I'm gonna love your comment here, Afton. Afton has just said that Coco is better than Aladdin. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Coco is better than Aladdin. Yes, it is. I thank you, Afton. You know what? I gotta say, I mean, the reason why Afton's saying Coco's better than Aladdin is because there was a dear friend in our circle who swears that Aladdin is the best Disney film, even better than The Lion King, even better than any Pixar film out there. Now, I am a fan of Aladdin, but to this friend, I will say this: Aladdin is great, but Coco is far greater. And I'll put it to you this way: did Aladdin make me cry? Did it hit me in my feels? No. Did I enjoy it? Absolutely. Did Coco hit me in my feels? Yes, it did. And you know what? I gotta say, from the soundtrack by Michael Giacchino to the vocal performances to the very song, which I won't spoil, the main song of the film, which you will hear in the last third of the film. If you are not moved to tears when you hear this song playing in Coco, you have a heart of stone. You have a heart of coal. You have a lump of coal where your heart should be. And quite frankly, I don't want you in my circle if that's the case. So yes, Coco is one of the best films of the year. It's a film that has hit me emotionally like no other film has. And man, when I watch this film again, I will add it to my collection of Pixar films. I will have a box of tissues this time because man, I was man. Sorry, man. I'm just. It's just when you see a film that's just so emotional, so emotionally rich, you just sometimes you're just at a loss for words. Sorry. Okay. Okay. All right. Bring it back. Get it together. Get it together, Vic. Get it together. You're almost done. You have one more film. One more film on your list. You can do this. Okay. All right. Yes. So that's numbers 20 through 2 on my list in alphabetical order. Now, last but not least is my number one favorite film of 2017. And this is a film that I am so pleased to have as my favorite film of 2017, and that is Blam! Blade Runner 2049, directed by Denis Villeneuve and co-written by co-written by Hampton Fancher and Michael Green. Hampton Fancher was also one of the original screenwriters for the first Blade Runner film. And man, Blade Runner 2049, it's an extraordinary film and an incredible work of art for many reasons. This film stars Ryan Gosling, Harrison Ford, Ana de Armas, Sylvia Hoeks, Robin Wright, Mackenzie Davis, Carla Juri, Lenny James, and Jared Leto. This is a film that is extraordinary because it's a sequel that is not only superior to the original 1982 classic, but it's also a film that expands on the many mysteries and questions of the first film while still offering brand new questions as well in its own right. Blade Runner 2049 is a film that is the best example of science fiction filmmaking. It's a film that offers like thought-provoking questions, philosophical questions as far as like its characters, its replicants versus humans. Like what is humanity? What makes a human human? Can replicants in this world call themselves human, even though they're not naturally born? Ryan Gosling's character, which is revealed in the first scene of the film, is a replicant himself, and his character, who's named K, who's a Blade Runner himself. He's a Blade Runner who hunts other replicants, and so his character also has to deal with that whole ethical dilemma. Like, he's an android who's killing his own kind, and that's what he's designed for. But throughout the film, he starts to question the nature of his own existence, and there are many questions that he comes across in his investigations that leads him to other avenues that haven't been explored before. So this larger mystery that unfolds before his eyes, we're very much in his boat because, as he's discovering clues, like we're right there with him. We're not, he's not one step ahead of anybody. Like, we're just there trying to answer the questions just as much as he is. And Ryan Gosling's performance is perfectly modulated. It kind of reminds me of, that same emotionally restrained performance that you saw in Drive or Only God Forgives, where he doesn't project a lot of outward emotion, but you can tell there's so much turmoil. There's just so much like a maelstrom of emotions and thoughts and feelings just brimming underneath his stoic exterior. And Harrison Ford was just great. I mean, that goes without saying. Like, his Deckard is a rather inspired continuation from his character in the original Blade Runner, and his character does yield a lot of important questions as well as to the nature of like his own identity as well. And the less said about his character, the better. When you see his character, it definitely raises a lot more intriguing questions. Also, the performances from three of the actresses in this film are also very much praiseworthy. I really liked the character of Anna of Joy, played by Ana de Armas. And Ana de Armas's character Joy is this 3D hologram. This woman who's a 3D hologram who also plays Ryan Gosling's character's companion, and her 3D hologram is kind of like a logical continuation, or rather evolution, of Scarlett Johansson's character in the movie Her, which stars Joaquin Phoenix. In that movie Her, Joaquin Phoenix buys this AI character who's voiced by Scarlett Johansson, and like she's like this female voiced companion who's like his AI partner. And Blade Runner 2049 takes that same concept and uses a 3D hologram, so you can actually see this woman as well as Hero as well. And Joy is a character who very much has her own personality, even though she's a product in this universe. She very much has her own identity, and her relationship with Ryan Gosling is pretty extraordinary too, because it's like you have this artificial creation, and you have Ryan Gosling's replicant character who's also an artificial creation, and yet these two artificial beings are trying to find this natural connection, specifically this very human connection of love or infatuation or friendship or some type of very human connection. It's like two non-human creations trying to find a humanity, if you will, their human essence. And I thought that their relationship was really thought-provoking, and it was something that I found rather unique, and it was definitely one of the main reasons why I love this film so much. Also, you have a Sylvia Hoek's character, this character named Love, who's very much in terms of being the antagonist, she's very much the Rutger Hauer of Blade Runner 2049, where Rutger Hauer was his character Roy Batty in the original Blade Runner was a rogue replicant who was hell bent on reclaiming his life and trying to extend his lifespan and trying to reclaim his own right to humanity. The character of Love in 2049, who's like the assistant / lieutenant of Neander Wallace, played by Jared Leto, her character is rather intriguing too, because throughout the film, she commits these rather horrible crimes where, like, she's very efficient, she's very brutal, but yet she always sheds a tear, like before and after every time she commits these atrocities. And the film doesn't really harp on it too much, but you're not too sure as to how you're supposed to feel about her character, even though she's very much the enemy, the antagonist of the film, especially towards Kay. You wonder if perhaps she's shedding tears because, like, maybe on some level she feels awful about being programmed to kill, being programmed to be a lethal soldier, being programmed to being a lieutenant to a megalomaniac. Perhaps she's shedding a tear because on some level, she wants more for herself than just being the right hand, the vicious right hand of this megalomaniac, Neander Wallace. You're not too sure as to what is the true nature of her character, but I think that the film could have explored her character a bit more. But what's given from what we learn of her character in the film, it's rather intriguing in and of itself. And Sylvia Hoeks, like her performance is also great too, because like she has that lethal femme fatale edge where, she's very much the femme fatale of this film, but she's someone that you don't want to be in the room with alone, because chances are she'll either slit your throat or break your neck or both, but at least she'll feel bad about it. So that's some consolation, I guess. And there's also Robin Wright's character who plays Lieutenant Joshi, who plays Ryan Gosling's character's boss. And her character is also rather intriguing in her own right, even though her appearance is rather smaller compared to the other supporting characters. I think that her character is unique in the sense that she's clearly Kay's superior, but on some level she does respect Kay as more than just a replicant, as more than just her subordinate. She does respect him for the person that he is, even though that she clearly tells him that he has a job to do, he has an investigation to follow through. Also, you have Jared Leto's character who plays Neander Wallace, who's a rather unique antagonist, and uh, this blind whose character is completely blind, and yet he has like an extraordinary vision throughout the film. His character Neander Wallace is a guy who's a successor of the Tyrell Corporation. The Tyrell Corporation was the organization that created all these replicants and created much of the technology that you see in the Blade Runner universe. In 2049, 30 years later, Neander Wallace is very much his successor. His character is like the world's first and only trillionaire. He's completely blind, and he has this unit that he wears on his neck, which allows him to see his immediate surroundings with all these floating drones that surround him, which kind of provide a 3D map out of his current surroundings. And his character is a rather pretentious figure, who, as I described when I reviewed the film a couple months back in October. His character is what I would describe as what the Ben Carson stance would sound like, because his voice sounds extremely pretentious and he has highfalutin goals about humanity, and he has a messiah complex, and he's trying to bring humanity from the muck of extinction, and he's trying to elevate them as gods, not just mortals. And his character is just rather it's rather unique is the word. And you know what, if and should there be a follow-up to Blade Runner 2049, I really want to see more from Jared Leto's character, because I think there's way more story that you can tell with him. And the many just the very ethics and the very questions that surround that character and his work, informs the whole film. And so I really want to see more of this universe. And if there's a sequel to be made of 2049, we really need to see more of this Neander Wallace character. And I gotta say, like, Denis Villeneuve, man, he's an extraordinary director. I think that this is one of the very best films that he has directed. And he absolutely does Ridley Scott's first film justice. And like I say, Blade Runner 2049 is not only my favorite film of 2017, it's a film that is a far superior sequel to its original predecessor, and it raises many extraordinary philosophical and ethical questions at its core. And if you're a fan of science fiction filmmaking, or if you're a fan of Denis Villeneuve's films, such as Prisoners, Sicario, Arrival, Enemy, and Ensandi as well, then Blade Runner 2049 is a film that you absolutely have to check out. It is coming out on Blu-ray in January, so if you have a Blu-ray or film collection, then you need to add this to your collection. And lastly, before I wrap this up, I gotta say, the cinematography in this film by Roger Deakins is absolutely stunning. Some of the best visual work I've seen from Roger Deakins. And I gotta say, Roger Deakins is one of the best cinematographers in the industry today. You look at his films like The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, No Country for Old Men, True Grit, Oh Brother Where Art Thou, Prisoners, Skyfall. If Roger Deakins does not get a cinematography Oscar for Blade Runner 2049, he never will. Because Roger Deakins has been nominated, I believe, like over a dozen times already, and he's never received an Oscar for his work. And in Blade Runner 2049, like the visuals, the way that he uses lighting combined with the saturated colors and the practical effects, it all comes together in an incredible package. As a matter of fact, pick up the art book, the art and soul of Blade Runner 2049, and if you pick up this book, you can see why visually this is one of the most stunning films I've seen from Roger Deakins, and also in terms of cinematography, the best looking film I've seen all year, right next to Dunkirk. So yeah, that's my hot take on Blade Runner 2049. Again, my number one favorite film of the year. If you haven't seen it, go check it out when it arrives on Blu-ray in the next few weeks in January. Whew. Well, all right. So that wraps up my top 20 favorite films of 2017. Whatever your favorite films are of 2017, please leave your comments below or email the show at codexprimepodcast@gmail.com. You can also find all of our episodes on Facebook Live, as well as SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, and YouTube. And you can also hit us up with that 5-star review on iTunes as well. And you can also find us on all over the social medias, such as Facebook, obviously, as well as Instagram and Twitter. I think that's it. Yeah, Twitter, Instagram. We're pretty much everywhere. Just Google Codex Prime and you'll find us. So yeah, that's pretty much it. That's my list of favorite films of the year. Thank you so much for joining me on this edition of Victor's Corner. Next week, I will also take the week off as well, so there won't be any content. Actually, let me walk that back. There may or may not be content next week for Victor's Corner. It depends on my mood. It depends on what's out there and what I can bring to the table. But if there is an episode next week, you will get ample notice, so I will let you know ahead of time. But yes, we will be back, as the main podcast will be back on Tuesday, January 9th. 2018, kicking off the new year right with a brand new episode of the Codex Prime podcast. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you to everybody who contributed to the chat. As always, I will catch you on the flip. Peace out, nerds, and a happy new year.